Hi, this is Steve Webster. Thank you for joining today's thought. So, we're actually in a series about dinosaurs. I'm going to relate it back to the Bible here in the coming parts, but there are some things that we have to do first. So, yesterday we talked about kind of like in a separate category, but I made a subtopic dinosaurs premises, identifying a premise when somebody says something. So, we talked about that yesterday. We also talked about how long does it take to fossilize something. So we now know it only takes hours, days, weeks, maybe a month or so to fossilize something. So in this part, we're going to talk about it's like, okay, now that we know that it doesn't take long to fossilize something, how long? So let's say that something died and it was had to bury quickly from what we learned yesterday, and to start this process, how so regardless of how long it took, did it take hours, days, months? It doesn't matter how long it took, but can we tell, well, how long has it been sitting there after it was fossilized? How old is this fossil, even though it might have taken days or a month? How long has it been sitting there? So then so in this video, I'm going to share my screen and talk and share some things. I'm not an expert, I admit that, but just do research and you find certain things. Um, so let's go ahead and jump right into it, and I'll start sharing my screen. Okay, so let's get into this. So I want to cover a few things in research, and you can do the same research and find out too. And remember the bias. I have a bias towards what I believe were 6 literal days of creation. And there's some, there's genealogy in the Bible. So I am definitely leaning towards a younger earth because I asked the question in one of my previous videos, why do we need Jesus? If we poke too many holes in how many days it took or years it took to create things, or was there death and dying before or after the 6 literal days of creation? Then it seems like it's more of a allegory story sort of thing. Then why do we need Jesus on a story? So that's why I lean that way. But you can also be a Christian, of course, if you believe in old stuff, right? Because God checks the heart anyhow. So with that said, and understanding there's bias on, I guess, two sides, because some people believe in the theory of evolution, Big Bang theories. Some people believe more in God's word. Well, what does it actually say in this potential matter? Can you observe? Does it apply in my observation today, or should it not? And things like that. So we use our brains. So in this case, I said, are dinosaur bones dated? It says, yes, dinosaur bones can be dated using a variety of methods, including radiometric dating and geological column dating. And then this tab, I said, are human bones dated without relative methods? It says, no, human bones are not typically dated solely using relative methods. The most common method for directly dating human bones and radiocarbon dating, also known as carbon-14 dating, which is considered an absolute dating technique, allows scientists to determine specific age of the bone sample based on the decay of radioactive carbon atoms within it. So right there, what I do is search, and you can search much more, but it's like, okay, so if we're searching for dinosaurs, don't use carbon-14 because we know they're older than the end of the decay of the carbon-14 rate of decay, which is like 5,000 years. So why bother? Okay. If they're human, well, most likely they're not over 5,000 years old. So we use carbon-14 dating. All right. Well, that's a bias right there. Then I said, how many dinosaurs were found with tissue? And this is the fact that some time ago, not too long ago, I guess, early 2000s or late, 2007 or whatever it was, someone stumbled upon to say, well, when I was dissolving the bones of a dinosaur underneath the microscope, the person was getting frustrated. It kept curling up, and then they realized, wait, this is tissue around the bone. There's proteins, collagen, whatever, and it's like, wait a minute, there's tissue, and then she brought in some help and said, well, wait a minute, now I see red blood cells. Wait, what? Uh, then there's discussion about Jurassic Park stuff. I read a paper on this. Her name's Mary Schwartz, I think, but whatever. She's well with DNA, like in the movie. It's like, isn't there more apt of not getting good DNA? It was in the ground. We have tools. We weren't really thinking about DNA at that time. So she started to go to proteins and things like that. She found some of these proteins. So that's interesting. And then we go to, I wanted, in an article I read, it said where she found some stuff. And so this is like a location of where things were found. And then I found this article, Smithsonian Dinosaur Shocker, Mary Schweitzer was her name. Found that. On a bias side, I went to Answers in Genesis, and there's also PhD people here. So just to make that clear that there are scientists that have different viewpoints. So I think that's good to know. So there's some discussion here about it. I did find how old she was focusing on proteins. How old can a protein actually be? Things like that. I have found other articles like with Mary about saying, well, I consider myself a Christian. I have a plaque and stuff like that. But she still believes in the old Earth, so that's fine for her. And then this is a quick video on. It's like, well, things aren't always layered horizontally. They can, if things need to be buried quickly, there's usually a disaster of some sort has happened to be able to create a fossil. That's one of the things we learned yesterday. So let me pause the video and share the sound here. Let's go ahead and play this again.
Notice, here comes the arch. Okay, now look for this. Look for the strata and how they're bent.
Oh yeah, I see.
Okay, so we're looking down this flexure along the East Kaibab monocline, a line where there's been a lot of bending of the strata.
You see it all the way up there.
And the strata are horizontal, and all of a sudden they go vertical.
Yes.
Notice, it looks like soft sediment deformation. You can see the strata as they're horizontal, and all of a sudden they turn 90 degrees. Isn't that amazing?
And they're not crumbled; they're folded. Like soft taffy.
So again, the point of that is a quick burial has to happen to form a fossil. It can't be gradually. I challenged that in my previous video with a ChatGPT 01 OS and on its premises it had, and it basically admitted, yeah, you have to have a rapid burial, and then the thing dies, and then that's one of the parts to create a fossil. So this is an example that even in Grand Canyon, you have what appears to be curvatures, right? You have curvatures, and it's like, well, you can't curve rock, so it has to still be soft to curve something. And so you see plenty of that in layers around the world, and that's why we're able to find fossils, because things have to be buried quickly, which again I believe matches quite well with a worldwide flood if you see it all around the world. And I mentioned about, well, we even see marine life at tops of mountains and so forth. So it's there's that. So if we go on to another screen, I said, is carbon-14 used to test dinosaur bones? And it says, no, carbon-14 is not used to test dinosaur bones because of the short life. And then I said, well, has there ever been carbon-14 found in dinosaur fossils? And I guess a Christian organization, this is Creation Science Update, they said, well, shouldn't there be? I mean, if we believe these dinosaurs were the same age as like man, per se, and the Earth is somewhere between late 5,000, 6,000 years old to whatever, should there be carbon-14 in it? So here let's see, 5 different commercial academic laboratories detected carbon-14 in all the samples that they they collected samples and they sent it. They found carbon-14. And it's like, well, wait a minute, see, it's supposed to be decayed by now. It's supposed to be decayed. And then you say, well, okay, what is the rate of carbon-14? So I think here I said, has dinosaur tissue been tested? 14, as I just said. And it says, well, yes, some dinosaur tissue has been tested, and it talks about that. Let me find what are the absolute dating methods. So yeah, then they talk about other dating methods to say you can have relative to say, well, how old is the rock around it, and therefore that's how old the subject matter is. Of course, it seems silly to do that if we found I don't know, skeleton remains buried, American Indian person very old. You dig it up. You don't test the rock next to it to say how old that person is, but relative is that's what it does. So it seems kind of odd because it's buried and pushed down. I guess that's the thinking, right? It wasn't purposely put into the rock, so that's kind of like common sense too, I suppose. But if someone dies on the surface from an attack or something, and then they're buried over time, they don't test the rock next to it. Is my point. So, what are the absolute dating methods to test? And so, within that umbrella, you have radiocarbon dating, potassium argon dating, which is interesting. It's underneath that category. And we have this, and this, and this is interesting. Analysis tree rings to determine the age of wood sample. So these are some of the things that they look at. So there's that. Then I thought, well, wait a minute. There's a decay rate. I said, does carbon-14 rate change at certain times? I thought, well, that would be good to know. It says, yes, the rate of carbon-14 in the atmosphere can fluctuate over time. I said, oh, what are those things? Well, nuclear testing can mess it up. Cosmic ray variations can mess it up. Calibration curves can mess it up. And so there's potential research on that one could do, right? And what's the last thing I have here? Does carbon-14 rate time differ from a normal calendar time? Because I read something about that. Yes, carbon-14 dating does not directly measure time on the same scale as our standard calendar, meaning the carbon-14 year, quote unquote, is not the same as a calendar year. It's like, okay, this is because the amount of carbon-14 in the atmosphere has fluctuated over time. So I guess that's where, when we see dating methods, they tend to have a range because it's like, what is the margin of error in some of these things? So I guess they must apply those to create a range. So I guess the point of today's message is it's not a absolute perfection, because things like this, you can maybe create a range and then you have confidence in that range, because certain things like carbon-14, for example, can be more observable, can it? Because if it's within a decay of 5,000 years, even though we can't live 5,000 years to observe it, or we haven't been observing it for over 5,000 years to its final decay rate, we can measure some of that as we live, maybe a generation ago, whatever that is. What is that rate? And then they admit that in the research, you can see where there can be fluctuations. And then it's like, well, a year, a carbon-14 year does not necessarily match up to a calendar year. So all these things and conversions have to be done. So let me go back to my full screen. So as we wrap up today, the point of today is to say, what are the methods used to say how old a fossil is? And I first stated that we now know it takes hours, days, months, a month or two to fossilize something. And there's been fossilized teddy bear, hats, tools, petrified things, even a pickle in a jar has been found, things like that. So, and petrified trees, it doesn't take long. So now the question is like, okay, I found a fossil which does require fast burial, even regardless of how long it took to fossilize. How long has it been sitting here? And most fossils are found either on the surface or below the surface. In the news, we see all that. To me, it seems like a lot. Let me just say a lot. Oh, I have this construction project. I have to go down. Oh, found fossils. It's like, oh, okay. And we also mentioned that when they find fossils, I actually went to I think a wiki thing to say how many fossils have been found with tissue. In this case, dinosaurs and stuff. And then some of them, it said that they also found other things, birds, frogs, and things like that, fossilized right there next to it. So it's like, okay, so that supports what I said before. It's like beds of rapid burial. What else was around there that got fossilized with it? And some of the things we see fossilized is what we see today. But yet there's a dinosaur. We don't see the dinosaur today, right? And then there's I'm going to wrap up the whole fossil thing, but there's not enough time to talk about everything and do really proper research and things like that. I admit that, but I'm trying to move things along. So just let me know if you want more research on fossil stuff. I don't mind doing more. But I think what I would like to do tomorrow is to say, okay, in history, has there been documentation that humans have seen reptile, dinosaur type of creatures? And I think that is also like supporting evidence to say, yeah, they did exist, but also it's interesting. Did they exist recently in history where people have documented? I think Marco Polo, as we share research tomorrow, documented what he saw in China, a dinosaur, for example. And plus, dinosaurs are written rocks and things like that. So that'll be tomorrow's discussion. So I hope that this was a blessing to you, and I'll see you next time.